Lesson 4.6b, absolute value equations and inequalities. The last lesson was to solve equations that involve absolute values. This time we are going to talk about the objective to solve inequalities that involve absolute values. Now the rule at the bottom which says in solving absolute value inequalities. To solve an inequality in the form of the absolute value of A is less than B, where A is a variable and B is always going to be greater than 0. Our answer will be a negative B is less than A and less than B. Now remember that was from lesson 4.5. That was the AND equation we discussed. And then we have to solve an inequality in the form of the absolute value of is greater than B, where A is a variable and B is greater than 0. We have the A is less than negative B, or, that's our OR equations that we discussed, inequalities we discussed on 4.5. And A is greater than B. Let's try some. And we're going to start with example 3. Right now we have the absolute value is all by itself. And if it isn't, you have to add or subtract, multiply or divide to get the absolute value by itself before we can discuss if it will work or not, if it has a no solution or a solution. So since the absolute value on A is all by itself, we can find out the equation. What we do is a little different than the equal sign. So you're going to have two equations like we did from yesterday's lesson, but this time it's going to be V minus 3 is greater than or equal to 4, like it is written right here. Then we have it a little different. You're going to still have V minus 3, what's inside the absolute value, but this time we are going to switch the inequality. So we're going to switch it to less than or equal to, and then you switch or the opposite of the number that is given. So that would be negative 4. So now we have our two equations we are going to work with. So we are going to find out what they equal or less than or equal to. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I'm going to have V is greater than or equal to 7, or we add 3 to both sides. V is less than or equal to negative 1. Okay, here's the two answers we discussed. Now we're going to graph it, and you have a graph line. And remember, this is a OR equation because it says greater than. So you're going to have your negative 1, your 0, and your 7. This is for my class only. I like only 3 numbers on it. And we are going to, since both of them have an equal sign on the bottom, I'm going to make it a closed circle on each of the numbers. And then it says, I'm going to read from the variable. It says V is greater than or equal to 7. So all the numbers greater than or equal to 7. And V is less than or equal to negative 1. So it's all the numbers less than 1. Remember from lessons 4.5 that the OR means the graph goes in the opposite directions. Or graphs, or it means a greater than sign. Graphs go in opposite directions. All right, let's try B. Again, the absolute value is all by itself. So we're going to have two equations. We're going to have W plus 2 is greater than 5, or W plus 2 is less than -5. And we are going to get the variables by itself. So I'm going to subtract 2 to both sides. So I have W is greater than 3, or subtract 2 to both sides. W is less than -7. So I have my two answers here. And now I'm going to graph them. And this is how I know it's an or, because it's greater than. So again, I have a negative and a positive, so I'm going to put in a 0, and I have a -7. Remember, all the smaller ones go to the left, and the bigger numbers go to the right. And this time, I have no equal sign underneath each of the inequalities, so it's going to be open circle. And I'm going to read it again. W is greater than 3, and W is less than 7. Again, you have to remember, or the greater than sign graphs go in opposite directions, and the arrows are going in opposite directions. All right, C. Again, we have the absolute values by themselves, and it is a less than sign. So right here, that's an and. And 15, it's a positive number, so we can keep going with the problem. So it's going to be 2n plus 5 is less than 15. But with the and, you're going to make your less than sign, and you're going to put -15 on the opposite side. Or, for you who have problems, you could do 2n plus 5 is less than 15, and 2n plus 5 is greater than -15. So you could do it either way. You could do it in this order, or you could do it in this order. I don't care which one you do. I'm going to do it in the second order because mostly that's easiest to remember to write. So I'm going to subtract 5 to both sides. So now I have 2n is less than 10. Then I'm going to divide by 2. So n is less than 5. And then on the second one, I'm going to subtract 5 to both sides, not 15, 5. So it's going to be 2n is greater than -20. Then I'm going to divide by 2. So now I have n is greater than -10. Also, you can write it, you can have these two answers like this, or you can write it -10 is less than, well, let's see what variable that is, n less than 5. So either one of those answers will work. Now we're going to graph it. I have 0, -10, and 5. There's no equal sign at the bottom, so they're open circles. And since it's an and equation, the graphs, oh, I can't spell graphs. Graphs line is in between. So that's telling me n is greater than 10, but less than 5, so you have an in-between line. Example 4. Manufacturing. The ideal diameter of a piston for one type of car engine is 90.000 millimeters. The actual diameter can vary from the ideal by at most 0.008 millimeters. Find the range of acceptable diameters for the piston. Okay, now we're going to write the equation. We have the diameter minus minus 90, or the ideal length in absolute value, is at most 0.008 millimeters. So this has to be less than or equal to. That's what at most means. This is the most it could be. So you have 0.008 is greater than the ideal diameter. So again, we have to find the range. So I'm going to make two equations like we've been doing. We have d minus 90, and since this has no numbers after it, it doesn't matter if you don't put it in. And then you have less than or equal to 0.008. And this one's an and, because it's a range. D minus 90. Remember, the second equation, inequality always changes. So it's going to be negative 0.008. Now we're going to do the math. I'm going to add 90 to both sides. And I'm going to have D is less than or equal to 90.008. And then we add 90 to both sides. D is greater than or equal to 89.992. So since it's the range and it's an and, you can leave it like this if you want to. This could be your way of answering. Or you could do 89.992 is less than or equal to D, less than or equal to 90.008. You do not need to graph this. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.